black spot on the sun today.
Welcome to the Okay. Welcome to the first online European Scaling Up Summit. On behalf of Verne and the Scaling Up partners, I'd like to welcome you to this event. We have participants from Ireland, the UK, Germany, Czech Republic, Poland, Switzerland, Italy, Belgium, and of course my homeland, the Netherlands. My name is Kees de Jong. I'm an entrepreneur, user, and strong advocate of the Scaling Up methodology, as it helped me building my companies over the past 20 years. We are here in the studio in the Netherlands, and like you, we are looking forward to 2 hours of scaling up, inspiration, insights, tools, techniques, and new thinking. I will be your host for today, but more important, I will help you to get your questions to our keynote speaker. You do that in the Q&A part of your Zoom system. And then I will pick out some questions that will be answered live in the session. And note, you can also upvote the questions from others. And now, I have the honor to introduce the man of the hour, Verne Harnish. I did not want to do that in the traditional way, so I created a short thank you speech. So Verne, thank you for founding EO, the largest global entrepreneurs association with over 14,000 entrepreneurs in 61 countries. I'm a member since 2003, and this network of entrepreneurs helped me enormously and is still today. Thank you for creating the Birthing of Giants, a growth program held at MIT and a program in which you still teach today. Thank you for writing the Mastering the Rockefeller Habits back in 2002, the book that started the whole movement. And of course, thank you for writing Scaling Up. This book has won 8 major international book awards, including the prestigious International Book Award for Best General Business Book. And it sold over 500,000 copies, and it has helped tens of thousands of companies. And thank you for founding the Scaling Up Company, a global executive education and coaching company with over 180 partners on 6 continents. And your European partners are here in this session altogether. Thank you that we can partner with you and your organization. Anyway, also thank you for the next 2 hours of your inspiration, and the floor is yours, Verne.
Well, Kees, thank you so much for that introduction. And by the way, I'm glad you got the memo about what to wear. We've got the white shirt, we've got the blue blazer jacket, so we didn't even coordinate that. And I also want to thank all of you for dialing in, because I want you to realize that, look, scale-ups are the first responders of the global economy. And what you're going to be doing over the next few months and the next couple of years is clear, because, look, from the last recession, you generated all the net new jobs, and you're the ones that generated all the innovation that really our cities and our countries need in order to be able to recover. And so what you do, many folks don't know your names, don't know, the spaces that you dominate, but you're critical. And that's why we've really enjoyed this kind of kickoff initiative that we've had over the last 30 months in both London and in Sydney, where we've been able to really focus on helping scale-ups. We've got a partnership with the City of London, that City of Westminster, with our European partner, Neil Lewis. And given that success, we had planned to move that to 20 cities here in 2020, but there was kind of an interruption. So we'll be doing that launch in 2021 with the idea that over the next decade, we'll take that from 20 cities to 150 cities around the globe, including in Europe, where we're going to be able to 10x our impact with helping over 20,000 scale-ups do, again, the heavy lifting that's absolutely necessary for our cities and countries in order to recover. Now, I want to kind of burn an image in your mind. In order for you to scale successfully and profitably, it really comes down to this. Are you doing things different? And look, we know you've got to have a differentiated advantage. We're going to get into some of those ideas, and a lot of people think they're doing it different, but look, if you price the same way everyone else prices, you're not different. If you deliver your product or service in roughly the same way that everyone else does, you're not different. And it's critical that you're going to be different really in these four areas that we focus on in scaling up. And that is around people, strategy, execution, and cash. Now I'm getting some kind of a feedback there, Pax. And what we want to do is look at each one of those four areas. And we want to be able to, here today over the next few hours, really focus on 4 Ps. What you can do around people, promise, process, and price. And so that's really what we're going to be focusing on here over the next couple of hours. And it really starts with the right mindset. You know, the research is clear that if you see the cup as half full versus half empty, whatever it is that you consider is success, you're more likely to achieve. Well, let me tell you the great news. The glass isn't half full, it's 3/4 full. If we take even the worst case scenario that McKinsey and Goldman had said could happen if we have the second wave, and we saw a wave of lockdowns occur here over this last weekend, the 2019 global economy was 88 trillion. If it drops by the 25% depression era levels, we're going to see a $66 trillion economy. But I want to put that in perspective. That's still twice what it was in the year 2000. And so my view is it's up to us to find that million or that billion in order to be able to power our organizations forward. And so it comes down to a mindset. It also, by the way, doesn't matter what industry that you're in. We really thought that the auto was going to put the horse out of business, but in 2019, it was a thriving $300 billion global industry. Now, it had to pivot, like a lot of us, from transportation to a much more interesting niche, which was entertainment, one of the fastest growing sectors up until this 2020 COVID mess. And so we'll see a recovery and it will come back. It comes back then to this idea that, look, it's easy for us to kind of want to shrink away right now, to kind of hide out. I got to tell you, in my darkest moments, I want to just kind of take off the rest of 2020 and maybe the first few months into 2021. And because you've maybe got some success, it's easy to start playing not to lose. I don't know if you're soccer fans like I am. I lived in Barcelona for 8 years. Go FC Barcelona. They finally got the La Liga championship back and Messi with some additional records. And in the last World Cup, they actually looked at it that when teams had a significant lead, they often ended up changing their strategy to defense instead of staying on offense. And 86% of the time, they would end up losing that match. And so it's really critical that you're there playing to win. I just finished a book, it's been out for a while, called Relentless by Tim Grover. And some of you might recognize that name if you saw the Michael Jordan television special, but he was the personal trainer to Michael Jordan, to the late Kobe Bryant, to Dwayne Wade. And what was interesting, in the NBA lockout, a whole lot of the players said, all right, I'm just going to sit back, not do my workouts. I'm going to rest. I'm going to hide away, but not Kobe Bryant. Kobe pushed the pedal to the metal. He continued to train. And when that lockout was released, he was in tip-top form and was able to dominate then the next several months. And so, first of all, I appreciate you being here and willing to continue to learn. You saw the quote in that opening session, Satya Nadella, who really has turned around Microsoft and created the second largest market cap company in the world. He said, look, it really was when we quit being a know-it-all culture to a learn-it-all culture. So thank you for being here to learn. And I want to emphasize that the key to winning wars in markets has always been the same thing. It's what I consider the oldest profession of time, and that is intel. I just finished up season 8 of Homeland and this Tehran season. I'm just wrapped up on Apple Plus. And it always has come back to whoever has firsthand intel, not watching the media, traditional media, but out there talking to customers and employees, particularly those working remote, and really in touch with the influencers. So I've suggested from the very beginning of this crisis and through it that the number one KPI is literally not minutes, but hours of talk time that you're getting into the marketplace. And where you can be safe, and I've been on an airplane every week since September, out meeting face-to-face with folks again safely. I think those of us who can get FaceTime. We just discovered that Salesforce in Europe and in Asia has ordered 650 copies of our book. And so I've set up a call with that top Salesforce leader next Tuesday, and I want to get that talk time and FaceTime via Zoom. And so it really comes down to whoever can learn, decide, and act faster than the competition in the marketplace. And it often comes down to not having answers, but getting a better question. And so, look, over our 2 hours together, I don't know if I'm going to give you great answers, but I hope I give you some great questions that you and your team can begin to really push forward on and scale forward to the rest of 2020 and into 2021. Because we have the answers, but it's the question. It's what we don't know that can actually get us in trouble. And it often comes down to a few key questions. My view, the number one question popularized by the late Clayton Christensen is, at the end of the day, what is the ultimate job we need to do for our customers? And maybe it's too much of a generalization, but I really think all of our companies, products, and services have the same job to do. And our hint comes from nature. As I've been flying over our countries, you look down and you see the rivers, and there are no straight lines in nature. And as that river is trying to make its way from Everest to the ocean, it's following one very simple rule, and that is the path of least resistance, or what I'm going to call the easy path. And if we look at the wealthiest guy on the planet, next to Putin, and that's Jeff Bezos, I can tell you that they obsess every Monday on this one question. And so I'd like you to really focus sometime over the next few months with your team and every week. What do we have to do to make it easier for people to find us, to understand what we can do for them, to order from us, to figure out how to use our product or service? You can have a killer app, but if it's not easy to use, it's dead upon arrival. And so seek that easy path, and you're going to see that as we get to the promise. And so let me get right now to very specific ideas and tools in each of these four areas. And if we look at people, the key question is who to pursue. I got to tell you right now, and it's, I think, going to accelerate. There's been a lot of amazing talent that has been furloughed throughout this crisis. And you've got a chance to really bring that talent into your organization to power it forward. We were able to access an unbelievable CTO we never would have had access to except for this crisis, to power on a new platform that we're building around what we're calling speed and near learning. We were able to strike a partnership with Harvard that I don't think would have happened over the last 12 years with wind to the back, but university's been dramatically affected by this crisis. And as Margaret Heffernan, the great British writer and CEO, has said, this is the time to be ambitious. So we have a tool called the FACE tool. Your coaching partners have got it. It's part of our growth tools where, as Jim Collins said, we got to get the right butts in the right seats, but he didn't give us a list of seats. So we put one together. There's a few spaces there for positions that I think are unique to your industry. I will have my board meeting tomorrow at the Reardon Clinic, and we have a chief medical officer. That's unique to that industry. But I can tell you this, even a startup has to really have all of those functions. And you start out by having your name next to every line item. Me, 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 me. And your job as you scale is to figure out how can you delegate, not abdicate, but delegate some things that you're doing to others that really pass three tests. Number one, do they wow you? Number two, do they need managed or not? They shouldn't. And number three, do they fit your culture? And so you're going to have a chance. And by the way, if you have the right team, your life is easy. If you have the wrong team, your life is hard. So it comes back to that idea of easy. Now, I want to drill even more specific, and we're going to give you some time as a team here to work this. I turn to Marcus Buckingham, and if you've read Scaling Up, you know I referenced 40 other books. I hardly have all the answers. We think it takes a village of gurus in order to really scale an organization. And Marcus, I think, presented really two important ideas around this space of people. First, that what you want to do is make sure that you and everyone else is playing to their strengths. But what's important is for you to understand what we mean by strength. It's not that you're necessarily good at it. And that's part of your challenge. Those of you that are on this broadcast, taking the time to learn. I know that you're great at a lot of things, but that's not what gives you strength. Strength is specifically that which gives you strength, gives you energy. And even if you're good at it, just thinking about doing it, if it wears you out, that is a weakness. And if you consider that, yes, time management's important, but energy is unlimited. We're really in the energy management business. And if you and your team are bringing more energy to the table, as Kobe Bryant was bringing more energy to that basketball court and Messi to the soccer pitch, if you've got slightly more energy than the competition, that is a significant advantage, a significant difference in the marketplace. And the second idea that he presented was this idea that good leaders play checkers, great leaders play chess. And that's why you've got to get more professional in your ability to hire. If you just do the feel-good interview, we as humans have a tendency to want to hire people like us. And as a result, we end up playing checkers. Every piece is the same and can only move the same way. In chess, you've got the multiple opportunities. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch that series, The Queen's Gambit, which is spectacular. So I want to put both of these ideas together. And it was really a student of mine, like Case, attended that MIT Birthing of Giants program, one of the first Dutch entrepreneurs to do it, in addition to Leander Beaker. Lois did. And she, by the way, built this very niche company out of Dallas. The riches are in niches, as we're going to talk about. And it was to really organize the org charts for large corporations all over the globe. And every time somebody would run into her office, and that's what happens as you scale, and says, look, I'm just overwhelmed. We need more help. Can we hire someone? She'd say, let's give it a pause. Because what you don't want to do is throw people at the situation. And she would give them this piece of paper called Love and Loathe. And she'd say, what I'd like you to do over the next 2 weeks is write down everything that you do that gives you energy and everything that you do that wears you out. And she would find two things. First, about 25% on either side, nobody needed to do. And that could be eliminated. I like to think about jobs as like hallway closets or garages. You know, you get them all cleaned out and then 6 months later, they're junked up. And you go in there and you find out, look, I haven't worn that for a year. I don't need that anymore. Now, you have two choices. I can build a bigger garage or bigger closet. I can throw more people at the problem, or again, I can clean it out. And so 25% was able to get off both sides, but there was still this kind of pile over here of stuff that folks loathe. And so she had 4 programmers, for instance, that built her software. And one of the things I would ask them to do somewhere in the sales or delivery cycle is meet with the customer. But when they did the list, they hated that. You know, if you have programmers, they don't want to see even the light of day. And so she went out and rather than hire another checker piece, another programmer just like the other 4, she found a unique chess piece. This programmer who didn't like programming, but loved the customer interaction. And that was her go-to person to be in those customer meetings. And then once he gathered how they needed to customize the software, he would come back with the famous 2 boxes of pizza, as Jeff Bezos would describe the optimum size of the team. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, share with those 4 programmers what they needed to do.
Well, I think you've noticed it, like we noticed it. We tested everything, of course, for days and days before. We seem to have a problem with the audio with Verne. They are now in their studio checking it and rechecking it. We hope that we can go live again soon. But I had just had a phone call with Verne and he said, Kees, 2 things. Why don't you have the people already work at the load or love exercise? It has been sent in your workbook, your exercise book. So Verne expects you now to work on it by yourself or with your team, the first exercise from this book. You will be accompanied very, very softly by our lovely Anna Rune. You've heard it before in the startup video of this conference. She will be playing slowly and half silently some music. And focus, please, for the next 9 minutes on that exercise, and we'll pick it up from there. See you in 9 minutes. Bye-bye.
And I could eat you up. I'm hungry. I could drink a bowl of your life juices. I'm not supposed to. And eat your heart out. I'll it beats, lick it from the cutlery. I'm not supposed to. Ooh, I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper. I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper coins on, like cotton candy on my tongue. You disappear before I'm done. You weren't supposed to. And even if I had one more bite, I would never be satisfied. No, no. I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper. I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper coins. I want it all, want you to melt upon me, want you to melt upon my tongue. I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper. I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper coins, and I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper coins. I want it all, the silverware, the plates of gold, I want it all. But this tastes like copper coins. Oh, 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 oh. Die andere is afmaken. There's a little black spot on the sun today. It's the same old thing as yesterday. There's a black-eyed car in a high treetop. There's a flagpole right and the wind won't stop. I have stood here before inside the pouring rain, with the wind turning circles, running round my brain. I guess I'm always open, chilling this rain, but it's my destiny to be the queen of pain. There's a little black spot on the sun today. It's the same old thing as yesterday. There's a black-haired car in a high treetop. There's a flagpole rag We've stood here before inside the pouring rain, with the wind turning circles running round my brain. I guess I'm always open, you'll end this rain, but it's my destiny to be the queen of pain. There's a fossil that's trapped in a high cliff wall. That's my soul up there.
Okay, that was the song King or Queen of Pain. Anna, thank you so much. So we solved the issue. It was a technical issue in Boulder, USA, in the studio of Verne. They solved it. So thank you very much for your patience. Verne, you can take it back, and good luck.
So for me, putting these PowerPoints together wears me out. And so through 99 designers there in Europe, I was able to find an unbelievably talented woman, Jun Yi, out of Munich. And she's half Korean, so very creative, half German, so it gets delivered now. And I just send her ideas about, hey, I need this slide to look like this and move like this. And overnight, those things get delivered. And then what can you delegate? So list, eliminate, automate, and delegate. That's really how you lead your organization. Let's now switch to strategy. And here the key question is, what do we need to rebuild, and why should people buy from you? Here at the beginning of this crisis, the great venture capitalists, Andreessen Horowitz, they put out a blog post that said, look, this is the time to build. And I know we're building out all kinds of capabilities during this crisis. In the process of building anything, there are two things that are really critical. First, that you get down a solid foundation. You get those piers down to bedrock. And then as quick as you can, you got to get the roof on. And once those two things are accomplished, you can take your time kind of building out the rest. And so we've got a tool that has been helping companies build and rebuild their strategy moving forward. And it's called the SWOT. Most of us know the SWOT tool: strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. And it's a useful tool, but it gets you focused a little bit too much internally and in your own industry. I think it's a great tool for mid-management within organizations. They actually are closer to what's going on. But as a senior team, it's important that we get above the forest and we get above the trees. And so that's the idea of this SWOT tool we created. And it starts with, first, the piers. Let's put down the foundation. And that's understanding deeply, what are your core strengths? The core competencies that Gary Hamel and the late C.K. Prahalad discussed in that famous Harvard Business Review article. If we look at, for instance, the French company, BIC Corporation, they started out as a company just making inexpensive plastic pens. And if that's what they saw their strength being, I'm not sure they would still be a thriving $2 billion company today. But what they understood deeply was that they were strong at two things. Number one, disposable, consumable, plastic, anything. And number two, they really knew how to put plastic and metal together, which is really difficult if you want to do it inexpensively and accurately. And as you know today, that allowed them to expand their product line from pens to lighters to razors to an entire myriad of products. And that may, in hindsight, not seem strange, but look, there is no other pen company that makes lighters and razors, and no razor company that does the other two, or lighter company that does pens and razors. And so it isn't obvious. These are different markets with different consumers, but they've been able to make that kind of pivot. So first, it's a deep understanding of what you're really great at. And here, the mistake is you're actually defining it too narrowly, and you want to look more broadly. And by the way, there's only going to be two or three. Next, and it's even tougher for you to figure out, is, all right, what are we really weak at? And these are weaknesses that you're not going to fix. You're just going to recognize that we're never going to be really good at this, and we're going to avoid pivoting into those areas. and these key strengths, weaknesses. I remember for years, I led the strategy session for the Post-it note division at 3M. I got to know Art Fry, who invented the Post-it note. And all of us have known for years that 3M has a real core strength. It was around innovation. They pivoted to the word science, period. So if you look at their website, it's all about science and scientists, which meant that they had a core weakness, which is they're really not strong in direct sales. And by the way, that's a significant trend. So that's allowed them to make sure they've known where they can shed certain products because it's gone direct to consumer. Now, what that meant is then they created a complementary strength to counter that weakness, which is their unbelievable ability to partner with distributors, distribution channels. And they actually measure that by the number of partner awards, vendor awards that they receive. And so when they created a paint that can easily peel off an aircraft, rather than sell directly to the aircraft organization, they partner with the Boeing and the Airbuses in creating a solution with their science. And then it's Boeing and Airbus that are really distributing that solution to all the airlines around the world. And so get clear what your core strengths and weaknesses are. And then what you need to do is get on the roof, look above the forest and the trends and say, all right, trees, and what are the trends? Where is the puck going? Right when this lockdown occurred over the weekend again in the United States, one of my close friends and mentor, Steve Watkins, called me and said, all right, where's going to be the opportunity in this that we can actually make the next moves? And that's the way you want to take a look at it. So that's our sweat tool. I hope you'll engage some of our coaching partners and kind of walking you through that as you can find ways to build and rebuild the organization. And what you want to do is you want to go after profit share, not market share. You don't want to own a big piece of a market. In fact, we created what we call the 770 rule. If you think of Apple, when it hit its highest market cap 2 months prior to Steve Jobs' untimely death, at the time, they only had 7% global market share, yet they owned 50% of the globe's profitability. Now, let's speed forward here 11 years later. And in 2020, at a $2 trillion market cap, they only have 14% global market share. 86% of people still use non-Apple devices, yet they own 2/3, almost 70% of the profitability in the entire industry. IKEA is the same, great European company, only about 7% global market share. 93% of people still buy their furniture some other place, yet they own a majority of the profitability. So I want to share with you MPA, and I do think the riches are in the niches. So I was in Tampa here recently, and he's an EO member, and he's in the plumbing, electrical, and air conditioning business. This isn't Apple or IKEA. It's, fundamental services. And he started out like everyone else. Man, I'll do those three things for anyone who wants it. In the beginning, you'll take whatever revenue you can. But once you cross that chasm, now you need to begin to focus and say no, and know the niche that you're going after and where the trends are pointing. So what Don, who is the CEO and founder of this company, has done is he said, you know what? We're only going to do plumbing, electrical, and AC for multifamily new construction. We're not even going to do renovations. We're not going to do repair. We're not going to do single family homes. And if you look at the trends of the United States, the aging of the population, folks, particularly because of this lockdown, wanting to get out of the Northeast and get down south, over almost 1,000 people are moving into Florida every single day. The wind is to Don's back. And because it's the only thing that he does in Tampa, he has become the best. And he's able to formulaically bid it. He can have the best competitive pricing. And because he knows how to do it so well, he can do it in much less time and therefore pay his people more. So he's getting all the jobs and he's getting all the talent. And he's been able to take this piece of the company to 30 million in revenue just in one city. And so what is the niche that you're going after? It's interesting. If you want to come back then to Intel, during this crisis, Starbucks reached out to our SEC and said, look, we want to let you know we're going to close down a lot more stores than we normally close down because our data had shown prior to the crisis, this firsthand intel through their app, that 80% of their customers were doing pickup anyway. And so they've seen an opportunity here to dramatically reduce their retail footprint. By the way, in the United States, they only own 4% of the entire market of coffee, yet they own 40% of all of the locations, on their way to 70%. We'll see if they do it through an acquisition and opening up these smaller footprint stores. And in the process, they rebuilt and created a new brand called Starbucks Pickup. So what are your opportunities as well? So we have a tool called the 7 Strata that you can begin to walk through. And the first 3 decisions are really your external expression of your strategy. What first word or two do you own in the market? Google owns search. Volvo owns safety. Domino's owned pizza delivery. Then you want to make a promise in 30 minutes or less, and then back it up with a guarantee, or it's free. And so I want to come very specifically around this idea of promise, the second P that we're really discussing here, and we're going to give you some time to work on. I want to take you to the Philippines. It's a country that has a distinction in having more ferry accidents than all the other countries combined. And so this shipping family said, look, let's, in a purpose-driven way, really fix this problem so we can reunite the people on the 7,000 islands of the Philippines. So they launched with a BHAG to have, 30 of these $10 to $12 million ferries in operation in 10 years. They started with 7, they're at about 22. And first notice, it's all around making it easy. And then if you look at their sides of their ferries, the owner said, Verne, you're going to love it. We posted right on the side the 3 reasons. And that's what the great godfather of influence, Robert Cialdini, suggested. If you want to convince somebody to buy your product or service, give them 3 reasons. It trumps 2 or 4 or a list of 10. So here, are you ferry safe? Are you ferry fast? And are you ferry convenient? And you're going to notice then on their second screen, if you take a look at this great transportation company, that they are emphasizing the 3 things. Now, what I also want you to see, if you look at this picture, is what they're not delivering. It's as important for you to decide what we're not going to do. You can't be everything to every customer. Notice, I don't see any really first-class seating there. If they had it, they probably would have shown it. There's no really fancy art on the walls. You're not going to get gourmet food on this particular. But if you want those 3 leading with safety and supported by the other 2, this is the ferry. And they're one of the fastest growing transportation companies in the world. And so we've got a tool. It's page 4 of those growth tools that you had a chance to download. And we want you to take some time here with your team over kind of the next 6 minutes and walk through this particular tool. It starts with, all right, we're not going to serve everyone. What's the piece of the market that we've learned after being in business for a while? It's going to be new multifamily construction, not renovation, not repair, not single homes. Who's our core customer? And then what are the handful of things that they uniquely need us to do versus all of the rest? Maybe with an understanding of what our strengths are. And then you're going to come back and say, all right, what are the 3 promises we're going to make? The one we're going to lead with, and then the 2 that are going to support it. Southwest Airlines, they went after salespeople, traveling salespeople first. They realized the thing they wanted most was low fare, but it was low fare relative to bus fare, not just the other airlines. And so for the last 50 plus years, they've led with one thing still today in a very turbulent industry. We are low fare, we are lots of flights, and we are lots of fun. And those 3 LFs have driven their business model. You need to find the same, like the ferry company in the Philippines, for your firm. So Case, if we can, let's put everybody back in their groups. And we've got 6 minutes here for folks to work it out in their own organization.
Begin maar. Gewoon wat doen.
The stage looks great.
Well, hello back again. Thank you again, Anna, for the wonderful music. Verne, we have some questions. But first of all, I need to apologize to France because I skipped France in my introduction, and there we have also viewers and scale-ups for France looking. And I think Laurent E, I think he's French, he so far made the best remark because he said, "Wow, so far this is brilliant. Thank you." So that's for you, Verne.
Thank you.
So we only have two questions, logical questions for now in the system. So I want to invite all the viewers to look at the Q&A part in your Zoom session. And if you have a relevant question for Verne, please put it in. And when it's a really good question, we're going to make sure that Verne is going to answer it. I'm not sure if you want to have this question, Verne, but I'm still gonna read it out to you. And that is, Verne, what about the responsibility and ability of companies to solve big social and climate challenges? Do you recognize the shift from money and profit as a goal to money as a means to a mission? So from company growth to growth in impact.
Well, you know, it's interesting, Case. Kind of decades later, the Business Roundtable here in the United States finally caught on to this about a year ago when they said, you know what, the job of a corporation isn't just to make money for the shareholders, but there is a customer, an employee, and a community aspect, the whole new stakeholder model. And the minute that came out, I reached out to John Kotter at Harvard. And I said, John, you've got to be dying here because he had done an 11-year piece of research back in the 80s where he looked at 209 companies over 11 years. And he wanted to answer a fundamental question. Is it companies who put the customer first, do they do better than companies that put the employee first versus companies who put the shareholder first? And you've got to love when research really surprises you. And what he discovered, it wasn't any of those three. There happened to be a handful of companies who treated all three equally that outperformed the rest by factors of 5 to 10, which is why we've had that built into our model in our one-page strategic plan forever. That you've got to make sure that the employees are taken care of, the customers are taken care of, and the shareholders are taken care of. And we've then added this community component. And so when we hosted Nate, who was one of the co-founders of Airbnb, and look, that company lost $1 billion right in this crisis. In January, before it hit, they had already decided that they were going to go to a stakeholder model of really driving the company. And the only way you're going to do that is what gets measured gets done. And so they've put real measures around what does it mean to really be there to support communities, our employees, our customers, as well as our shareholders. And as you know, it's always been business, not governments, that have solved almost every one of the social issues that we have faced here on the planet. So if we go back, and I'll just wrap it up, you know, when Amazon looked at this question of easy, they also said, how could we actually make what we do easier on the environment? You know, that clear plastic that a lot of retail products are displayed on physically, they said, look, that sends hundreds of people to emergency rooms who get cut every day by the knife they're using to open it or the plastic itself. And with the aging population, it's become even more of a critical issue of how do we get that package open easier. Plus, that plastic is really bad on the environment. And so Amazon went out to their suppliers and said, look, the customer can see your product, you know, in a 3D kind of 360 view right on the website. Why do we have to then package it in this really harmful packaging to both our customers and the environment? And so they've been able to eliminate a lot of that had been going into our ground and landfills. And so, yes, we absolutely want to include a stakeholder model in driving our business. It isn't just about the money. And by the way, the money is simply just a way for us to see that, hey, we're obviously, the crowd is voting that we are doing something that they want versus what they don't want. And that's why it's a metric as opposed to an end in and of itself.
I think that was about your speaking time for the Q&A. I just want to say one thing. Verne, did you see here in the studio the man height, the live big picture of yourself here on the walls? Maybe the studio can zoom out. Have you seen it? To the left?
No, but thank you. And we've got our same look there, so thank you.
How about that? So,
Hey, by the way, I've got about 4 minutes before this next segment. I want to go back to the brand promise, if I can, for a moment, Case.
sure.
Because there's some really important nuances here. And it starts with, so how do you actually put this together? I want to recommend a book, and that's Dr. Francis Frey, or Frey is how you pronounce it, the great Harvard professor strategist, who wrote a book called Uncommon Service. I actually consider it the best strategy book ever written. And in there, what she does is she walks you through a process that says, look, you first want to go out and talk to customers, as we had suggested. The mistake is, though, doing everything that they ask. So you want to put together a list of 10. And as you know, customers have more wants and they want to pay less. And that's the train wreck. They'll literally want you to bankruptcy if you're not careful. And so what you want to do is, of that list of 10, you want to decide what are the 3 that on a scale of 0 to 5, you're going to be a 10 at. You're going to be so good at safety and speed and convenience, like that ferry company. And then the rest of the list, you don't want to deliver it at all. You don't want to be a 5. You don't even want to do it. And she suggests that means you're probably going to upset or disappoint 93% of the market, but that's what you want to do. I don't want to go to IKEA and buy furniture. It's a terrible customer experience. You're walking through the rat maze and having to put it together and take it home yourself. But there's 7% of the market that wants that price and enjoys the design that they provide and those Swedish meatballs. Those are kind of their 3 brand promises, and everything else is inconvenient. And that's what the great companies do. The second key idea, so pick your 3 out of the list of 10, while your competitors are trying to be good at all 10 and never end up being great at anything. That's the key. So read Dr. Francis Frey's book, Uncommon Service. Number 2, we really have to come back to what gets measured gets done. And so I want to use an example most would be familiar around the world, and that's McDonald's. And they decided, look, they're not going to be health food, but they're going to put speed back into fast food. What's interesting, though, is how do you actually measure the speed? And here's the key. You have to measure the brand promise from the customer's perspective, not your perspective. So you might look at, time in the drive-through, but look, what really matters to the customer, the stopwatch starts and ends from when the customer thinks they want to get something to eat. And so I remember in Ashburn, Virginia, their main customer are children. And yes, Burger King might be a better hamburger, and maybe their drive-through at the time was slightly faster, but there were 2 McDonald's within 2 minutes. The Burger King was 20 minutes away, and that counts towards the speed factor. The corner of the 4 corners that you're located, so it's easy to get in and back out given the traffic, and the way that it's packaged so that you can eat it on the run versus having to kind of sit still and consume. All of that is a component of speed that McDonald's understands well. And yeah, given all the ups and downs they've still had, they're still the largest restaurant chain in the world. And they've gotten even clearer lately of what they're great at and what they're not trying to be great at anymore. So really a couple lessons there. Read Francis Frey's book, understand your list of 10, and then pick the 3 that fit your core customer. And then on this forum, when we talk about how are you going to measure it, you need to measure it from the perspective of the customer. You've got to get into their mind. It's not what is easy for you to measure. So I think we're right at top of the hour, Case. And let me now switch to, and if you can, to our execution. And here, the key question around process is your speed to ease. And that's the key thing that we really measure in process is both the cost to do it, but most importantly, the time. If we can get it done quicker, one click, if you would, on Amazon, make it quick and easy to be able to return that product. That's how you win in the marketplace. And what I think is interesting, if you look at the Global 500, and the last data I've got is from 2019, if you look at their revenue per employee, one of the key numbers that we look at our one-page strategic plan, they average almost $500,000 per employee. In turn, us lean, mean, fighting machine, mid-market companies, our average revenue per employee is about a fourth that, $126,000 per employee. So how can this be? That these big, bloated, Fortune Global 500 companies can be 4 times better at generating $1 per employee, a euro, whatever currency you're looking at, than we are as these mid-market firms. And that's why one of the key metrics that we really think is critical to look at, particularly in the execution side of your business, is gross margin dollars, not gross margin percentage. That's important. But the number of gross margin dollars per employee that you're able to generate. Andy Bailey, who's one of our partners and coaching partners, many of you, Case, you know him well, and others, when he had a huge telecom company and was a client of ours before becoming a coach, he looked at that number, and at the time he was averaging $75,000 per employee, gross margin dollars, not revenue, not profit. And he said, look, what I'd like to do is drive that to 125,000. Well, using our tools, he was actually able to drive that to 275,000. His gross margin dollars per employee were almost twice almost everyone else's revenue per employee. And the key there is really to focus on process. See, one of the challenges as we scale is we get so focused on making sure that our functions run well. I want a well-oiled operation and sales and marketing and HR and IT function, that we forget that the way our employees and our customers and the world experiences our organization is through a set of processes that cut horizontally across those functions. And so I think it's our failure as we scale to be so focused on function that we ignore process. And that's why we created another tool called PACE. So if you can get the face right, the senior team, the right butts in the right seats, then your job is easy. And then if you can get the pace right, the speed, and that really is around process. And so we've got a tool that's part of your handout that we're going to be putting you in a moment to take a look at. And it really is going to walk you through 3 things. By the way, it normally takes about 3 hours. We like, again, best if you've got somebody who's kind of an expert at understanding process to guide you through this. But what you want to do is you want to first name, like you've named your functions, you want to name the 4 to 9 processes that really drive the business. And by the way, a lot of those processes are going to have the same names as other companies, just like we share a lot of the same functions. But you need to get them down. And there's usually not less than 4, and there's not more than 9. If there's more than 9, then they're just sub-processes within a broader. Now, I'll give you some examples in a moment. Number 2, just like with functions, you want to be super clear who is accountable. And look, I want to emphasize that the word accountability is different than responsibility and authority. If nothing else, they're spelled different and in all the different languages. Yet we have a tendency to use them interchangeably. See, the person who has accountability, the ability to count, it doesn't mean they're boss, doesn't mean they make all the decisions, doesn't mean that they can tell everybody what to do. Look, the person that's accountable for that function or this process is to be counting it, to be measuring it, to make sure that it's running well, and to give it voice, to scream loudly if we're having issues in that particular area, which leads then to number 3, which is we need to measure. We need to create, again, the key performance indicators, the KPIs, that tell us generally, is it running better, faster, and cheaper, less cost, we're delivering better quality, and most importantly, can we do it faster? And by the way, if you can do something faster in minutes instead of months, there's no way you can spend as much money, and you're more likely actually to have higher quality because you have less people touching that particular process. And so those are the 3 steps we're going to have you go through here in a moment just to get the process started. And the one client that I had when I was in Barcelona at the time became the most successful kind of unicorn within Spain is a company called Softonic, and who has generally overall accountability for process is your head of operations, your COO. So I sat down with their COO and their team over an afternoon, and I'll step out of here for a moment, but these ended up being their particular processes if you want to take a look at them. And notice they're going to have a lot of the same names that you're going to have, though there's a couple that were unique to them. Content creation and publication being one of those. And then what we did is got very clear that who had the sub-accountability for each one of those 7 processes, and that really drove success up until they were able to successfully sell to a Swiss firm and exit. And so that's an example of how you begin to kind of name these processes, setting accountabilities, and then we had to get clear how are we going to measure each of them, but particularly speed. So with that, I want to recommend a book. I don't think you have to actually read it. I just want you to buy the book. It was co-written by Jeff Sutherland, the co-creator of Scrum or Agile. Many of you recognize that process, and a lot of folks have actually referred to what we do as helping create agile scale-ups versus just scale-ups. And he wrote this book called The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And I want you to get the book and just set it on the desk of your COO or head of operations, just to remind them that we really do have this kind of 4X slop inside all of our organizations, that we could take our revenue, gross margin dollars, you pick whatever it is, and 4X it without having to add a single additional person to the team. And so I want to give you a concrete example. I feature them in the book Scaling Up. They're one of the fastest growing franchises in North America called Nurse Next Door. They're Canadian based out of Vancouver, co-founder Ken Sim. And first, they're playing to where the puck's going, and a significant trend is we're having the aging population, those of us with aged parents, many times rather than put them in a nursing home would prefer to have a nurse come to their home. And I remember when Ken had just 28 employees at headquarters, but they had, hundreds of nurses in the field, contract nurses serving their patients, a little bit like Bootsark does, the great Dutch company. And one day his head of payroll comes running in the office and said, "Look, Ken, I'm dying here trying to get in all of the information from these contract nurses so I can just get them paid. And look, we're doubling every year. We're going to grow probably another 100%. And I'm already working 80-hour weeks." Now, any kind of reasonable leader would have said, well, get somebody hired. But back to what we talked about earlier, that's just kind of throwing people at the problem. Instead, they brought in a lean consultant, a guy named Mike Martin out of Portland. And I'll give you a long story short. A year later, they doubled the size of the company. Any way that you want to measure it, revenue, number of franchisees, nurses out there serving customers. Yet, their headquarter count actually dropped from 28 to 23 people. Now, they didn't fire anybody over this initiative. If you do, everyone's going to stonewall you. Nobody's going to want to go there. Instead, they lost a couple of people through natural attrition. That happens as you scale. And a few others said, look, let's just go out in the field, including being a franchisee. And the ultimate was, and Ken was telling me at one of the meetings, his head of payroll came in and said, look, Ken, even though we're twice the size, I can barely find 30 hours of work. What else can I work on? And so it's a real time example of Lily being able to do twice the work in what was taking her 80 hours now in less than half the time. And by the way, it wasn't just in payroll that they were able to really tighten up that process. They had a process around how to acquire and onboard a new franchisee. And the old way they did it, they could barely bring on one new franchisee a month. Once they leaned out that process, cleaned it up, they were able to bring on 5 new franchisees a month. They got a 5-fold increase in productivity. And if you look at that particular case study in the book, Scaling Up, you're going to see that they had these kind of gains in all aspects of the organization. Now, I do want to mention one specific case that I'm running into a lot. And that is this division of labor. It was an idea that we birthed in the Industrial Revolution. And it's interesting, the gentleman that I feature in kind of the opening chapter called The Barriers, Alan Rudy, is on to his new venture. And involves having to deal with our government in terms of filing paperwork with Medicare and Medicaid. And the problem is that things have really slowed down inside his company. And the thing that we discussed was the fact that literally a dozen different people needed to touch a particular process to get it done. And what Lean usually finds out is if there's a dozen people involved, and it could take maybe 3 weeks, there's probably only about 3 hours of real work that's being done. All the rest of it's what they call waste. It's sitting in somebody's email, waiting for them to do maybe a 10-second aspect of that process. And so what's happening in a lot of companies, I think it's been forced upon in a way through all this remote work, is we're going back to one person, maybe two, doing all 12 steps themselves rather than having to pass it off 12 different times. And so a dear friend of mine who's in the mortgage business, if you want to get a new mortgage, and by the way, that industry is on fire with the low interest rates here in our country, there would be a part of the process where it just required somebody to do a 10-second activity, but it would often sit there for 6 hours. And in the meantime, the client who's anxious to get that loan through has called or texted 3 times, and it just creates all this extra work. Instead, she's trained herself in all aspects of the process, and it's been crazy. The whole thing has been going smoother for her, for the customers, and for the rest of the people inside the organization. So I want you to go back and rethink this division of labor idea that we birthed in the industrial age that I don't think is as applicable here in the information age. And if we could actually have one person do the 4 or 5 steps instead of having to hand it off, which is what really causes the mistakes and adds so much time and frustration, that's where I think we're headed in this next kind of 2021 as we revamp our processes. And I want to recommend a book, and that is Paul Auker's Banish Sloppiness. And it was Neil Lewis, our coaching partner up in London, who pointed out that, hey, this used to be the old underground map until Henry Beck came along. And he said, look, let's redesign it. So again, it was easier for people to be able to discern which tube they needed to take next. And it's in this process of both simplifying and making easy that usually drives then the process improvements that you need to make inside the organization. And so what I want to do is in a moment here, I'm going to take some Q&A, but I want to take you kind of back to our process accountability chart. And you're going to have some time as a team to, again, just start this. First, I'd like you to be clear. It is going to be the COO or the head of operations that's going to have overall accountability. Next, I want you to begin to start thinking through, all right, what are those 4 to 9 processes that really drive the business? And particularly because our work is driven around these quarterly themes, this idea that between now and the end of 2020, what's the number one thing that you want to get accomplished? What you want to do is figure out what is the associated process that goes along with that. So let's say you're trying to improve your sales close ratio. I can tell you that in the last 12 years with wind to our back, I don't want to take anything away from your salespeople, but many of them just had to be there to take the order. But now that things have really tightened up in this crisis, we really have to up our game in sales. And in fact, we know from research that only 26% of your salespeople really have the skills that are necessary to close business in this much tighter an environment. And so you might decide, all right, what we need to do is make sure that we hold tight or improve our sales close ratio between now and the end of the year. That would then make sense for you to also look at, okay, so what is our sales process? And if in general, if you can pick an associated process with each one of your quarterly themes, if you've got 4 to 9 processes, that means that you're going to be able to kind of design or redesign one process every 3 months, which means over every 12 to 24 months, you're going to get all of them redesigned. And again, processes like jobs are like hallway closets and garages. You know, you think you've got it clean, but then 6 months later, it is all clogged up again. And what you've got to do is take time to clean it out and go in there and see, all right, what kind of dumb things have been added to the process? What kind of policies and procedures got thrown at it? How did we make it so much more difficult for people, both our customers and our employees, in order to engage in that process, and then clean it out? And the late Dr. Deming's fundamental rule was, you should only work on one process at a time. If you try to do it on multiple, you can end up with what's called sub-optimization, because look, the knee bone connects to the thigh bone. All of these processes interact together. And so if you open up and try to unpack too many of them, you can actually create a bigger mess. So you want to get clear, all right, what is the number one priority for the next few months? What is the process that's most related to being able to improve that KPI, that critical number? And then get in a room and some of the tools of Lean, the Hoshin method, and others, and dig into the book Banish Sloppiness. You can actually download it for free. And so just Google Banish Sloppiness. Paul Akers is providing that. And to give you a really concrete example, I want to take you to a company, a large company I visited earlier this year, Steelcase. They're one of the world's largest manufacturers of office furniture. And back in the year 2000, they were doing $4 billion in 12 million square feet. Today, they do $4 billion in revenue out of 1 million square feet. They have figured out how to use 1/12 the amount of space and steps in order to produce the same kind of revenue. And the idea of the 2-second lean, which is Paul Akers' real fundamental work, is this: that we need to engage all the employees in figuring out, not just have a lean expert, but get all of them engaged in figuring out just easier ways to do everything within the organization. If you can just save 2 seconds at a time, it quickly adds up. So when I was there earlier this year, they had just started this initiative, and the first thing they did is they empowered, if you would, all 3,000 employees to look for improvements, and then if they found it, to shoot a quick little video. And then using some Microsoft technology related to Teams, they are posting those videos, and through Bing is able to then watch those videos, convert it into text. So like a YouTube channel, you can search it. And so what they're doing is really taking advantage of the wisdom of the crowd. Think about it today. I just got a new Range Rover. I wanted to see how to change out the battery in a second remote that I was given. Somehow or another, it wasn't working. I don't know why. And so I could have waited to call somebody at the dealership or go back. No. What do? Today, we go out and we search and we find a YouTube video that the crowd has voted up. And in a matter of 2 minutes, I was able to save time by doing it myself and just change out the battery in that particular remote. And that's where we're going in the 21st century. You want all 30 or 3,000 of your employees engaged in finding better ways to do things. And look, let's just shoot a quick video. We can all do it easily with our phones, and then get it posted up on your own internal, in a way, YouTube channel, to where, like they do at Bootsarg, they don't need to have experts, but they've got 14,000 nurses that are going to help a particular nurse who's got problems finding a vein in order to take blood. And he or she's going to be able to figure that out in 2-minute video that they find on a Saturday night versus trying to find some expert who's probably not available. That's where we're headed in the 21st century. So Case, let's take some Q&A for 4 minutes, and then we'll put everybody in a 6-minute exercise.
So, Verne, the number one voted question I will share with you, but you don't have to answer it yet. You can answer that at the end of your session.
All right.
That is, what has been your greatest lesson in your life? So we'll skip that question. You can think about it. And we have two questions about strategy and about the brand promise. The first one is from Victor Meyer. Victor Meyer, probably from Germany. How do you back something up by a brand promise guarantee?
Well, the first thing I would encourage you to do is read Jim Collins. He goes under the name James Collins, so you got to search that, in Harvard Business Review. And he wrote an article about, and I want you to search for the term catalytic mechanisms. And that's what he called what we call a brand promise guarantee, because by putting a guarantee in place, causing some pain to you and your people if you don't deliver on the promise, that'll be a catalyst for you to innovate and make change. And so first, I want you to get that Jim Collins article from Harvard Business Review, search catalytic mechanisms, or I reference it in my book, Scaling Up. And I want you to read through example by example by example of companies. And my favorite in there is Granite Rock. This is a company that crushes rock that's used to build highways. And they had what's called a short pay guarantee, the same one that we have inside Scaling Up with our coaching partners. If we do some work and we send you a bill for it, and you didn't think it was worth that, you can pay us what you thought it was. And I got to tell you, that will get our attention for sure. And you know what we find, and Granite Rock had a similar situation. There was a contractor who didn't get a road opened overnight when the traffic hit the next morning. And so the Department of Transportation in California levied a heavy fine against them. Now, the reason they couldn't get it open is there wasn't access to the gravel they needed. Now, that wasn't Granite Rock's fault. They're not open 24/7. But they came back then to Granite Rock and said, look, because we couldn't get rock when we needed it, that's why we couldn't open. And initially, they wanted to fight that. Look, it's not our fault. You guys should have planned better. But what came out of it was the first rock ATM machine. So just like you can get cash 24/7 with an ATM, they created a rock ATM to where 2 a.m. you could drive in, put in your card, and you could get 12 ton of number 2P gravel if that's what you needed. And so it became a catalyst for Granite Rock to be really one of the most respected companies in their industry. So the same with us. You know what you find? Like Oracle's $10 million guarantee if their Exadata server isn't 5 times faster than IBM. Nobody actually ever takes you up on it. Instead, it really gives them permission to let you know that you messed up. And that's what you want to know, because the worst thing you want is for that customer to start bad-mouthing you to other customers. And customers talk to customers, particularly about the bad things that happen. And so the real idea of the guarantee is to assure the customer that, look, we're going to take serious your concerns and we're going to do what we can to respond to it. Now, every once in a while, you'll get an unreasonable customer, but that's the exception, not the rule. And all that tells you is that we probably don't want to do business with that customer anymore. And that's important to learn as well.
Okay. Thank you so much, Verne. I think that was the time for the Q&A in this part of your session. Think about the answer to the other question, and I would like to invite all the participants to look at the questions and upvote the question you think is most relevant. So we have some time at the end of Verne's sessions to do some more Q&A. I think now you have an assignment, right, for the group?
We do. So we're going to be taking a look at here at this process accountability chart. It's page 5 of the growth tools. And so get with your team and at least pick what is the most important next process that we need to work on. A way to think about it is, where are we suffering the most drama in the organization? Because what you want to do is be a drama-free zone. And that's the process you want to pack and unpack and see if you can make it easier for everybody, customers and employees. Let's put them in their groups.
5 minutes.
Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly, oh, into the light of the dark black night. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see all your life. You were only waiting for this moment to be free. Oh, blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark black sky. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of the dark black night. Into the light of the dark black night.
Oh.
So next we want to look at price, the fourth P. And this is in the cash area. And for me, price is your quickest way to recover and generate cash. And we know that cash is king. It is the thing that growth sucks up if you're not careful. And so we've got a tool called Cash. It's your cash acceleration strategy tool, where there's all kinds of different ways that you can take a look at to improve what we call your cash conversion cycle. Our second tool is what's called the Power of One. And this is our partnership with Alan Mills in the cash flow story. Alan had actually, interestingly, created technology in his first company that banks used actually to evaluate companies in terms of their ability to repay loans, because that expertise wasn't broad inside banks. And he sold it then successfully, used by many banks all over the globe. And then he realized that maybe I should create something similar for business owners, because often, as he says, banks speak Portuguese and the owners will speak Spanish, and it sounds similar, but they're really different languages. And so he wanted to get everybody on the same page, because the challenge is this: a lot of companies end up growing broke. And that's when, look, revenue's going up, your profitability's there, but it's not converting into cash. And so we created kind of 7 levers for you to take a look at. And we've got a piece of software that all of our coaching partners have access to. And if you're working with them, they can actually do a complimentary, no charge cash flow assessment. Just like Case, your team has developed an unbelievable scaling up assessment that allows folks to see how they're doing in people, strategy, execution, and cash. And again, I hope you'll reach out to one of our European coaching partners and have them do that for that scaling up 4D assessment for the team here to end the year, and to really analyze your cash flow story. And the very first lever that he points out in the Power of One is the power of price. And if you look at Phil Kotler's 4 Ps of marketing: product, price, place, and promotion, it's price that takes money directly to the bottom line and into your bank account in terms of cash. The other 3, you've got to spend money in order to make money. And what I find interesting is where we're so focused, and we have over the last 50 years, on the cost side. That's why we've really been focused on supply chain management at the heart of our ability to scale. What happened in 2007 is the globe switched. Prior to that, from World War II to 2007, we basically had more demand than supply. So if you could just show up and deliver, you could get the business. But in 2007, what really precipitated the financial crisis around the world is overnight, we ended up with just the reverse. Today, because roughly another 2 billion people coming on into the middle class out of the 7.6, they've got to produce before they can consume. And now we've got more supply than we do demand in almost every field. Think about just energy. The United States now is a net exporter of energy, which has really impacted the Middle East to the point where we know in Dubai, they had $1 billion deal with the Paris Louvre because they really have to be driving as much entertainment and tourism as they do the traditional oil and gas industry. And so when you're in a situation where there's now more supply than there is demand, what you have to realize is that the opportunity isn't as on the cost side. Yeah, you still need to pay attention to that and make sure you've got people inside your organization, probably lower down, more to the front line, watching those costs because they're closer to it. And what you as the senior leaders need to do is better educate yourself around the price. In fact, one of the things I want to note is that all the unicorns, there's all this conversation about unicorn companies, those that are able to scale to $1 billion in market cap at about half the time as it traditionally took. Every one of those companies is focused more on the demand and price side than they are on the supply and cost side. In fact, those companies, they really don't supply anything. You know, Airbnb, they're using everyone else's homes and apartments. Uber's using everyone else's cars. And instead, it's their deeper understanding of what the customer wants and where they are and where they were just before they purchased. It's their deep understanding that Amazon has of what the customer's been buying that allows them to suggest products that you might love. In fact, right now they're at about 19%. They know if they can get to 33%, they're just going to proactively ship you something that they know you're going to love. And when you open up that box, it's the old sales, what we call puppy dog clothes. I'm going to fall in love with it and want to keep it and not return it. And so they're getting much, much better at their predictability because of their understanding of the customer, the demand side versus the supply side. And the other reason we get, and if you think about it, how often does the price change on Amazon? Every hour. If you're a traditional retailer, you put a sticker on that product and it doesn't change till you have to put it on sale to try to get rid of it. If you think about Uber, traditional taxis there in Europe, the ones I took in Barcelona, had a consistent cost per eighth of a kilometer. Yet for Uber, it'll be inexpensive for you to get to that event, but boy, they know there's going to be huge demand to try to get home, and so they can raise the price. Their price is based on demand. And in fact, if you look at the airline industry, that it had come out of 4 of its most profitable years before this crisis. As one leading CEO of an airline said, if I've got 1,500 people in any one day on a route, let's say from Barcelona to Paris or Amsterdam and back, if I've got 1,500 people in any one day on that route, and there's only 1,200 different prices, we've screwed up 300 times. And so look, it's the same seat, it's the same route, but nobody pays the same price. So why do we think we ought to be charging the same price to our customers, B2B or B2C? And the reason price is so difficult is that we're selling not to companies, but to people. And you know what we learned? A guy won the Nobel Prize 2 years ago for discovering it. People are not logical, they are psychological. And to underpin that, I want to take you back to the godfather of influence, Robert Cialdini. First, he's the one who said, you want to convince somebody to buy your product? Give them 3 reasons. It trumps 2 or 4 or that list of 10 we were talking about. The second thing he did some research around was pricing. And I was just in León, Mexico last week with the state down there that really wants to focus on encouraging scale-ups. It happens to be kind of the heartland of Mexico. There's 1,000 shoe manufacturers there. So I got my first pair of leather tennis shoes. Case, you got to see these things. You're going to want a pair, and I'm going to have to send it to you. Anyway, when I'm down there in León, what you realize is that, psychologically, we're at a restaurant with one of our clients, Pro-An. They're the second largest manufacturer of eggs in the world. From there, they've got 8,000 employees. We're coaching them in the tools of scaling up with our coach, Patricio, our international coach. And we're sitting there talking about the psychology of pricing when they give us the wine list for lunch. And sure enough, the wine list is listed from least expensive wine to most expensive wine. And what Robert Cialdini's research found is all you have to do is reverse the order of that list and put the most expensive at the top to least, and you're going to drive 26% more revenue. You didn't change a wine, you didn't change a price. And if you then anchor that list with 3 or 4 really expensive bottles of wine, you can pull revenue up 250%. Look, it's not logical, but it's psychological. So every year for the last decade, I've been going to China. And we've been teaching these tools. My book just last fall came out in Mandarin, Simplified Chinese. And 2 years ago, Adrian Wall was in my audience. He's a YPOer. And he's got, by the way, a very simple strategy. He calls it a taste of New York in Shanghai. And again, riches are in niches. And he's gone to these iconic families in New York, like the owners of Joe's Pizza, that has lines typically out the door all night. And he said, look, let me bring this iconic brand to Shanghai. And so they said yes. And he then put up at every one of the Joe's Pizzas a menu with its pricing. Well, that was a year and a half ago. And by the way, it was always listed from least expensive, vegan, to most expensive, meat lovers. So when I was there a year later, last November, Adrian was actually chairing this same kind of summit that Case is chairing for our European partners. And he said, Verne, you've got to come down and visit one of the restaurants. And I want to show you something. So I go down there, and sure enough, he said, all we did was take your idea, that of Robert Cialdini's, and we just reversed the order of our menu. And we put the meat lovers first, most expensive, to vegan last. And we didn't get the 26%, but we got a 16% boost in revenue. We didn't change a slice. We didn't change a price. And that's the power of understanding it psychologically. Now, this is a good B2C, business to consumer example. What about B2B? So let me reference a critical article that came out 2 years ago, again in Harvard Business Review, called Good, Better, Best Pricing. And this detailed article walks you through a lot of business to business examples. And as you go all the way down through it, you're going to see at the very end that Dell EMC, today it's called Dell Technologies, but back then it was still Dell EMC. They went from a single price service contract after the sale to a good, better, best price offering. And revenue only went up 300%. Look, just changing the psychology of the pricing increased their revenue threefold. And so we took that idea in this crisis, and we decided right there, April 8th was our very first one, that rather than have a single price, we did a good, better, best pricing offering, as we are for this masterclass we've got coming up here in December. And it's been amazing to watch the psychology that's driven. And I guarantee if we had not had the three-tier pricing versus a single price, we would not have had the success and the revenue that has helped us power through this particular crisis. Now, I want to also recommend a book. There in Germany is the guru of pricing, a dear friend of mine, Herman Simon. He's the founder of a hidden champion company called Simon Kucher. They're the largest pricing consultancy in the world. Last year, they did over $500 million in revenue. And we hosted Herman at one of our early summits here at the beginning of the crisis. And we recommended a book. And right now, because they make it easy, I want you to get your phone and I want you to go to your Kindle app, your Amazon Kindle app, because in the time it takes for you to write it down, you could just purchase it and download it. And I want you to go get Herman's book called Beat the Crisis. He wrote it coming out of the last recession of 2008, and the book is spectacular, but I particularly want you to go to chapter 6. And in chapter 6, he details 7 pricing strategies that companies, and he gives detailed examples of real firms, most of them from Europe. So you're going to, I think, really identify with them as a European audience, of strategies these companies use besides just lowering your price in the crisis to really begin to power forward. Because look, if you can add just €1 to your price, that euro will go right to the very bottom line versus all the other things you might have to do to generate that marginal additional euro in profitability. By the way, I should also mention he wrote a real modern book called Confessions of a Pricing Man. And so I want you to take a look at that book as well. Read everything that Herman Simon has written, including, I want you to Google this, HBR low price Herman Simon. One of the things he felt he had left out, and so he corrected in an HBR article, is what if you want to be the low price leader, like IKEA is in the marketplace? He's identified 7 strategies. And if you only do 6 of those, you're going to end up being a commodity. But if you can implement all 7 around your low price strategy, you can have some of the highest profitability, like the historical 13% profit that IKEA has generated, where the industry in general averages about 2%. Now, it dropped since the death of their founder last January. Hopefully, you're going to be able to recover. But IKEA has been the profit leader by a factor of 6 over the entire industry, and they are the low price competitor in the marketplace. So this isn't about being the low price or the high price like Apple. It's about understanding the strategies behind your pricing so you can generate that 2/3 of the profitability of your industry that we suggested during the strategy session. And so, Case, I want to quit here a little early so we can take a broader range of questions. And then what we're going to do for the last exercise, I'll let you guys decide, is put people back into groups. And I want them to at least get the conversation started around pricing. And let's start with, hey, let's commit to learning more about pricing. Let's attend a workshop. Let's hire the Simon Kucher folks. Let's read these books. Let's get that HBR article. Let's look at chapter 6. But most importantly, let's start having more talk time at our council. Mine Monday morning, 9 to 10 a.m., where we've really had a lot of talk time around pricing, particularly through this crisis. And in general, up your game in price, like you've had such a focus on cost over the last 50 years. So, Case?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Verne. So before we discuss or we have the pricing assignment, if we do that, I didn't understand it. Let's do 1 or 2 questions indeed. I have a question from the Netherlands, from Annelies Batelaan. Back to the process accountability chart. Her question is, how do the process accountability chart relate to the actions and key thrusts, key initiatives from the one-page plan? Of course, this is a detailed question for everybody who is using the scaling up method, but maybe you can explain how those things are aligned with each other.
Yeah, well, in general, the kind of base camps along to Everest, we call this kind of 3 to 5 years. It's when you think you're going to double the revenue next. Now, I got to tell you right now, in this environment, it's anyone's guess. And that's why you need that firsthand intel down in the streets of the marketplace to know what you need to pivot to next. But we've decided, for instance, over the next 12 months, that we want to build this new learning management system that's going to power our online education and the like. And given that key thrust or capability that we want to add to our delivery of services to our customers, that then ties back to, all right, what's our overall process for onboarding, first acquiring, onboarding, and serving a customer in our online education? And so that's how process relates to the priorities that you're setting. So remember, the priority you've got this quarter is going to be related to a key process. The priority that you're going to set for 2021 will likely be related to 2 or 3 key processes and areas that you want to move into. EasyPay, one of their key thrusts was to move from just being in Australia to going into 6 additional countries. That meant that there was some additional process that they needed to add in their organization. And then out of that process, hey, the only way that we're going to speed it up or do it easy is we're going to need to take this set of actions this week. And so that process, as we know, you only eat an elephant 1 bite at a time, ultimately boils down to what is the sprint? Because that's what people want to run. They want to watch the 100-meter dash in the Olympics, hopefully next summer, not the marathon. So we were going to break it down to a set of 13 100-meter dashes. And all we want to do is be clear. What is it we need to accomplish this week? And then we're going to meet about it and readjust. And that's the Scrum or Agile approach versus the old PERT charting approach that was last century that we know has failed. And we saw it most recently with Quibi. This was a venture that Jeff Kattenbaum launched with Meg Whitman, 2 very famous entrepreneurs and CEOs who spent $2 billion in 2 years because they were confident that this was a highly attainable goal they could achieve. And they launched and 4 months later had to shut it down. So you want to engage in weekly iterations close to the customer as you improve process and you try to achieve what are some key thrusts within your business. but be willing to pivot in any 1 week as you learn additional intel.
Okay, great answer. So I have another question that relates a little bit to what you were saying, from Louise Léonard. I think it's France. Verne, what are the common challenges scaling businesses when digitizing? So if you go from manual process to digital processes, what is to be avoided?
Well, I thought Jim Collins was really clear about this in the model I've been showing, good to great. If you want to go from good to 3 times good, you first have to get the right people. Then you've got to make sure it's built around the right strategy. You need to know, what are the 3 promises you're going to deliver? If it's going to be safety, then, only then in the execution phase, do you add digitization. And what you don't want to do is digitize the wrong stuff, and you don't want to digitize a mess. And so that's why it's important for you to get the process cleaned out first, and then digitize what's left, versus just, again, speed up the mess. And that's why it's critical, the sequence with which you do it.
We will recognize a little bit with your remarks, digitize the mess. I think we're all been there. So are you now ready for your final question, or the first question? What has been your greatest lesson in your life, Verne?
Well, there's a phrase that comes to mind, that there is no losing, that you're either winning or you're learning. And that gives you permission, if you've hit failure, to just say, all right, what is this lesson trying to teach me? And so it's winning or you're learning. Number 2, and it's a very practical thing, and I've talked about it deeply in the people section, it's what Regis McKenna taught me. He taught Intel and Genentech, and he was the marketing guru to the late Steve Jobs. And that is, when you're faced with any challenge, don't do it alone. Go out and take a piece of paper and make a list of the top 25 influencers, people, brands that you can bolt on that are going to be able to move further, faster. And so that's what I did when I launched YEO, now EO. And it's what we've done with this new learning management system that we're building. And I've made the list, and number 1 on that list, Michael Horn, the guru in blended learning, and we've got Michael engaged with what we're doing. I've added Kevin Oakes to that list. Kevin built the number 1 learning management system years ago, and John Kone, who was our early advisor who ran Dell Learning, is now working closely with Kevin Oakes in that learning area. And so,
Verne,
anytime.
Verne,
Yes.
can I just add to that? I used your technique of building that list of 25 people who influence your idea the most. I did it. It's such a simple concept, but it's so powerful, and for me it worked. It's like the little things, but the list of 25 people, and you start with number 1, you start calling, and then until you have them all.
You got it. So I think we're almost up to our time where we're going to put them in, and hopefully with the power of 1, we're looking at price, but we've given you 6 other levers that, and again, we have a piece of technology that you can engage with a coach for no charge that allow you to be able to do what-if scenarios, that if we could just improve the gross margin by this, or reduce our accounts receivable, or improve our accounts payable, the real sensitivity of your business model to these 7 levers so that you can drive more cash, because that's the thing that's going to give you safety here as we continue to power through this crisis.
Okay, Verne, we have still a couple of minutes for you to close up. So maybe we want to drink a little bit more from the fountain. So if you have like 3 or 4 minutes that you can share with us your latest thoughts on the situation where we are now in, and the challenges and maybe the opportunities for scale-ups at this moment, that would be a great final of this session.
Yeah, well, I think it's so critical for you to keep the right frame of mind, that there are always opportunities in a crisis, and it's your job to find those and lead your team, through the storm. And the analogy that I like to use is literally a climb to Everest. The Everest is your big, hairy, audacious goal. Naomi Simpson with Red Balloon, who we talk a lot about out of Australia, the one selling services or experiences to people.
She lost 90% of her revenue in April, just like Airbnb. Yet she's up 20% on the year using our tools. And one of the things she shared a few weeks ago was her new big, hairy, audacious goal for this decade. They want to go to selling one experience every second. Right now, they're about one for every 39 seconds. And so that's where they're headed over the next 10 years. That's their Everest. So keep your eye on the prize. But as we've read the books, as we've seen the movies, those teams are on Everest, and then these storms come in. And that's what we have, is this once in a lifetime storm that has hit us. And at that point, what you've got to do is just be clear. What is the next step up the mountain, or what is the next step down? But what you can't do is freeze in place. You have to keep working. You have to keep moving. You have to keep feeling to make sure that you're not going to fall through the ice and fall off that mountain. And your team is counting on you to do that. And so what does it mean in a really practical sense? I just want you to wake up and be clear. What do I have to do in the next couple of hours? And communicate that with your team and your team as well. And that's why the daily huddle is so important. It did surprise me that when, again, we hosted Nate, the co-founder of Airbnb, on our last virtual summit in September. He said the very first thing they did when the crisis hit in March is he and his two co-founders and the senior team started into the daily huddle. They had not been doing it before as a senior team, and they initiated that, and that has given them the talk time. Many of our clients have moved to it twice a day so that we can make quick, very agile moves and then see what the reaction is and decide what you're going to do tomorrow. And then last, and this really came from Susan David, I want people to realize that you've been shell-shocked, whether you know it or not, that we as leaders of our companies are suffering PTSD. And she gave me a quick test and I failed it. I clearly am exhibiting PTSD kind of symptoms. And so how do you deal with those kind of stresses? And she was very practical, and I took her up on it. She said, I want you to pick 3 times a day. I want you to put it in your calendar, and I want you to give yourself permission to do something for yourself. So if you could see my office, Pax knows I've got a piano in there. And I'm working on this song I want to perfect, and I'll just take a few minutes to play the piano. I'll admit I love playing solitaire. And so after this broadcast, I'm going to go give myself permission to go play a couple of hands of solitaire. And then I'll be back at it with a vengeance on what I've got to do, which I already have scheduled for the next couple of hours. So keep your eye on Everest, but then lead your team one step at a time and be willing to adjust every single day if you need to. And then last, give yourself permission to take a break and do something fun for yourself, at least 3 times a day.
Thank you, Verne. I think that's a great ending to this wonderful 2 hours of your insights. So I'm thrilled, I'm happy. I've listened to your speeches many, many times, and every time there's something new that I get inspired by. But just to make sure, I wrote down some points that I just want to make sure that I repeat, because repetition is the best way of learning. So if everybody allows me, I have about 90 seconds to close this up. So you shared with us, are you playing to win or not? You have to create talk time, which is the #1 KPI. You should have the right team in place, because that will make your life easy. And what wears you out is a weakness. What wears you out is a weakness. That was a strong one. Then another technique: list, eliminate, and delegate. Profit share is not market share, and that's the 7 by 70 rule. And make things easy for your clients, for yourself, and for your co-workers. The key is how to speed up easy. So the speeding up of the process. Lean out your processes. That's what I wrote down. And rethink the division of labor. I thought it was very smart. not cut it up in little pieces, but have people feel more responsible for one piece of the labor. Engage all employees in this lean process. One of the big one, always radically rethink price or your price strategy. You have to buy the book, Beat the Crisis. And if you want to achieve something big, you have to create the top 25 list. That was in the end of your session. And the last one, or the final one, your team is counting on you. So you have to do it as an entrepreneur. And then the last one, maybe the best one of today is play solitaire, right?
Yeah.
How about that for a summary, the 1 minute summary?
Case, you nailed it. Thank you so much, by the way, for hosting this. You're always so gracious. Anna, for the beautiful music. And again, to all of you scale-ups, what you do is important. And it's important that you take this serious, do the work, don't take yourself serious, as the late Alex Trebek, who passed away last week from Jeopardy, suggested. So take your work serious, don't take yourself serious, and we're going to get through this crisis.
Thank you, Verne. And that leaves me thanking the team, thanking the IT, thanking Anna Rune here in the studio for the music. Hopefully, thanking you of all the viewers. Hopefully next year we're going to be back live in a European summit, or we come to your country. Thank you very much, and see you next year.